Great, thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Really excited to be here. As Ziad said, it's 3 a.m. in California, so if this presentation goes great, it's because my coffee is working. If this presentation doesn't go well, it's because it's 3 a.m. in the morning. But I'm sure, I hope I'm going to share something meaningful for all of you. Really good to meet all of you. And sorry I couldn't be there in person, but looking forward to the discussions here. So let me share my screen and tell me if you can see this. You can see my screen, right?
Yes.
So I'm going to quickly go through a few slides and talk about this whole industry and the shift from clouds to neo clouds. So I'm one of the 4 co-founders, and I mean, it's though the topic says shifting from clouds to neo clouds, the whole point of this conversation is to really drive the discussions around what can service providers do within the AI infrastructure space, right? So about me, I'm actually in California, in the Silicon Valley, and I've been in this industry for about 30 plus years. I've worked at NVIDIA. I was at NVIDIA, I was a product manager at NVIDIA back in 2000s, early 2000s, when NVIDIA was a gaming company. It is not a data center company. And have also worked at companies like VMware, and my last job before joining Hosted.ai before starting Hosted.ai was at Expedia Group, where my role was to build Expedia's Gen AI infrastructure. Right? So it took me a good, it taught me a lot about this industry because Expedia Group was, Expedia is one of the largest customers of Amazon Web Services. In fact, AWS has an acronym called NICE, where they say it's Nike, Intuit, Capital One, and Expedia, and all of them spend over $1 billion on infrastructure. And then my job was to bring AI into the Gen AI into the infrastructure, and that took the bill from 1 to 1.2 billion, right? And then I realized that there is a lot of money that companies are spending on AI infrastructures, GPU infrastructure, and so on. And that's when I reached out to my current co-founders, James, Julian. We all got together and said, you know what, maybe we should do something for this industry. Right? At our previous company, OnApp, the one that you see here, we were all together for about 10 years, and we built OnApp into a really big company that we sold in 2021. And OnApp was catering to the cloud industry. It was all about, we call it as cloud in a box, right? So you have, we were enabling service providers, hosters and data centers to just build cloud. Now we said, you know what, we could do the same thing for AI, right? And that's how Hosted.ai was born. And Hosted.ai started as the parent company, but then there's 2 other brands that we have right now, which is Packet.ai and GPUSservice.com. So I'll talk more about it. And I've had good experience building companies, and I've also helped exit a few companies, including one to Akamai, one to Accenture, and then we sold OnApp to Virtuozzo. So overall, it's been a really good, let me call it as, few years in the industry, and service providers, hosters. That's kind of been my DNA for the last 15 plus years. So let's talk a little bit about the market, right? So I think the GPU market or the AI hosting market is a very, very interesting market. So today, if you look at, I'm sure you hear different terms in the industry. One is called GPU as GPU as a service, or AI as a service, and so on. So today, if you see about 28% of infrastructure revenues from AI, right? So what does it mean? Around 77% of SaaS applications are powered by AI, and 46% of enterprise apps have embedded AI. And in fact, I'm sure you all have heard about the latest developments where there's technologies like Cloud Code and others where you can write applications in a few hours, and even an hour. Earlier, writing a full stack application was probably taking days, if not months. But now we are at a point where you can actually do it in a very, very short amount of time and actually do a really good job of it. So it's quite amazing that that we are at this place where it's only 28% of this infrastructure that's still getting revenue from AI. So there's a lot of expansion opportunities. So that's going to increase. I mean, it increases at a rate of 44% year over year, and in 2030 it's going to be somewhere between 46 and 50%. Right? So what does it mean in terms of market? Basically, there is about $4 trillion of incremental AI hosting or service provider revenue globally. Right? This is a massive market. Probably, I would go out on a limb and say this is the biggest market of our times. Right? There's been no market of this size, and I'm sure you all watch the news, you hear the deals that NVIDIA does. While we were all growing up, you hear $1 million deals. Then you have $1 billion deals. But now every day you see somebody is doing 100 million deal, 300 million deals. So hundreds of billions of dollars are changing hands every day in this industry. It's quite amazing. It's quite amazing, quite scary. So, and this, by the way, all those data points are some very amazing reports by Virtuozzo. So if you're interested, I can share that. ZI later can share the larger group. So, in this market, right, let's look at what are the use cases driving the market. There are basically three main use cases that are powered by GPUs. So the first use case, and I'm going to take one step back, maybe we take one full step back and talk about, even before going into the use cases, we talk about the shift in how things are being done today. See, till like 2023, 2024, the way software was written was you would write code, that code would run on a processor, and that processor processes the code and you get whatever output you want. I mean, like, Salesforce is an example. It has a front end, it has a back end, all of it run on a CPU, and you got, you go and when you look at a customer's data, you go to the application, you open it, you see it, and then it's pretty standard as to how those applications are built, right? But now the way it is built is slightly different, right? So if you today, in fact, last week I built a small CRM application. And in fact, I use Cloud Code to do it, and the way it is done is very different. So instead of just writing code, what we do is we take some models. In this case, I took the Sonnet model, and we give it data, which is, it's a way to train the system. So you have models, data, and the models and data are running on the GPU. So earlier it used to be software code running on the CPU. Now for the same application, you build it with enough code. There is still some code which needs CPU, but a lot of it is models and data, which all need GPUs, right? So in that sense, for GPU market, there are three use cases that are important. The first one is training, right? So training is you're building foundational AI models. I'm sure all of us use ChatGPT these days, Claude, Gemini, and all these. There are many foundational models, right? These are models that are actually driving a lot of, let's call it as commercial use today, right? So and these models need to be trained, right? I mean, the reason ChatGPT is able to answer our questions is because it knows, it has learned. How do you learn something? By training, right? So training is a very important use case. Then there is fine-tuning or tuning, as we call it, right? So you have a model that is trained, and let's say, going back to Expedia as an example, if there is a public model that's trained, I would take that model and then feed it Expedia's data and make the whole model an Expedia model, right? So that is, let's call it as, the model is being tuned to Expedia's infrastructure. Yeah. So that is called fine tuning of the model. And then the last thing is inference, when the model is actually being run. Right. So you build a model. It's like, but you need to use the model to get results. Right. It's like, in many ways, I call training as it is the same or the equivalent of building the internet, and then you had fine tuning, which was, kind of making it better, making it faster. And then you had inference, which is like using the internet. Yeah. So that is where these are the three main use cases, and all of it is powered by GPU infrastructure. And we're expecting about $4 trillion worth of incremental revenue in this market. This is a massive market. And this is also the biggest shift in the industry, right? It's been a long time, right? So if you see, 2008 was the time of mobile, right? I mean, I still remember that very famous Apple keynote by Steve Jobs where he said one more thing, and iPhone was introduced. I mean, of course, before that we had BlackBerry and all those things, but iPhone really changed the whole mobile. And then you had cloud. AWS, Microsoft, Google, all of them kind of came. I mean, between 2012 and 2015 it started growing, but 2015 cloud became very mainstream, right? And now you have AI, right? So it's the big industry driver at this point in time, right? So it kind of, so you make it like, if you see here, right, this is the revenues. I mean, this is NVIDIA's revenue in the last 3 years. And you see, it's like double-digit billion-dollar growth every year, right? So it's massive. But here's the challenge, right? Which is, how are GPUs sold today? So it is like GPUs. Like I said, GPUs needed to use your model/data, which essentially is like, think of it as the backbone engine running AI infrastructure, right? So GPUs today are sold as static cards or slices. So it's sold in pass-through mode, or there is basically a technology that NVIDIA has, which is called MIG. Right? So I don't know if you can see my phone, right? But imagine this phone had 8 different pieces. I mean, and each. So MIG is basically taking your phone and saying, okay, here are 8 different chunks of the phone, and you can use 1/8 of the chunk of the device, right? So these are the two modes in which GPU capacity is actually being sold today. It's static or pass-through, which is one, like, it's almost like saying, okay, here's your cloud infrastructure, the entire cloud is for one customer, right? So that is the static pass-through mode. And then you have the MIG mode, where you're actually saying you're slicing it in a very fixed manner, and here is a small slice of the larger pie for your customer, right? So basically, GPUs today are being sold like how dedicated servers were being sold about, back in early 2000s, right? So if you needed, in early 2000s, if you needed more server capacity, you would go and want more capacity, you would say, okay, here is a new server, right? So this is, it's basically, it's like GPUs are basically being treated like dedicated servers, right? If you like, for example, you need 1.5 GPUs, you can't get it. I mean, either you get 1 GPU or you get 2 GPUs, right? So anyways, this is how the whole GPUs are being sold today, but we all know from the service provider and hosting industry that this really doesn't work well, right? As a result of it, utilization is very low, right? So you have these very expensive devices. I mean, like, in fact, somebody was telling me that the latest NVIDIA GPU server is now $500,000. The B300s, $500,000 for one GPU server. I mean, we know, like non-GPU servers we're getting for like $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, but this is almost 20x the cost. So, but in this very expensive infrastructure, utilization is very low. So they have 70% training, 40% tuning, and 50% inference. So that much, this is no industry benchmarks, by the way. You can also go and look at a company called CodeWeave, the S1, and it shares more of this data, right? So it's quite bad. I mean, it's like you're buying like these hundreds of billions of dollars of infrastructure, and a few hundred billions of dollars of this infrastructure is sitting idle. Isn't that crazy? It really is, right? So, and in terms of how it impacts both customers and providers, customers have to buy more capacity than they need, and they have to pay for the GPUs they don't use, right? And providers have capex and opex for 30 to 85% of GPUs that are remaining idle. This is really bad economics both for the consumer. And let's see who are all the players in this market, right? So there's several players who are actually driving this market of GPUs. And I'll kind of talk a little bit about that, right? So first, of course, we have the hyperscalers. We have AWS, Azure, Google, and all other clouds, like Alibaba Cloud, and so on. Then you have your neo clouds, right? So you have Lambda Labs, Cody, Nebius, and others. Right? So these are like, as the name suggests, these are new clouds, right? And most of these new clouds are either come from a crypto background or a Wall Street background. Cody used to be a Bitcoin miner before they became a neo cloud. They had a lot of GPU capacity, and hence they were able to, provide GPU services, right? So you have, you have the hyperscalers, you have neo clouds, and then there are the tier 2 and tier 3 hosters and cloud service providers. Right? Again, there's not many of them. You're covering the market, maybe like 5 to 10% of service providers and CSPs today offer GPU services, so it's a very lucrative market. It's a very small fraction of hosters and CSPs who actually offer it, right? Mainly because the capex mode is very large. Right? It takes a lot of capital investment to get started with these hosters and service providers. So the hyperscalers and neoclouds, the way they sell today is very simple. Right? They sell single tenant infrastructures. For example, going back to this example, if this is your GPU, one full tenant. That's it. So you don't, unlike CPU, storage, networking, and all other resources which are shared, the GPU is not shared. Right? So you have, you have a GPU server, but how do you actually make it, taking a GPU server and converting it to a neo cloud or a cloud or a GPU cloud is not easy, right? So, and most hosted service providers are server and DC specialists, they're not GPU gurus. And GPUs are complex devices, very complex devices. Then there is, let's say you even bought the platform, you managed to, say buy software from say Hosted.ai, you start running a cloud. How do you generate demand to sell this, right? Like demand generation, how do you find customers who need GPUs? That's not easy to do as well, right? Because hosted service providers know how to find customers who need GPU storage, networking, applications, and all that. But finding GPUs, demand generation needs a little bit more sophistication, right? And then, let's be, as an industry, we're all quite conservative, right? Usually service providers say, I need to see the proof even before I can test it. Yeah, so that's this is really what stops CSPs from moving into the GPU space. Here's how we have, right, as a company, Hosted.ai, which is the company that I founded with 3 other founders. I'll talk more about them later. But how we help is we actually do a few things. Right? The first layer that we offer is a software layer for GPU as a service. So you can buy a GPU server, you can put our software on top of it, and you can be up and running with an elastic multi-tenant GPU as a service platform within less than 24 hours. And we also do GPU overcommit. We build technology that lets you share a GPU, it lets you overcommit the GPU, right? So this is very deep tech. It's like very deep, sophisticated technology that we've built into the platform that actually lets you overcommit the GPU at light speed. Right? When I say light speed, it's almost real time. So we figured out how to share GPUs amongst different customers, like how it's essentially like how cloud was sold. Right? We are bringing the same cloud style semantics into the world of GPUs. We also do GPU demand generation, which which is we actually have this domain called GPUasAservice.com, which connects buyers and providers. And if you're an enterprise, you submit requirements, get quotes, and you contract with providers. So it's a wholesale GPU deal platform, right? And this offers the best prices for anyone looking for GPUs. And then we also have very strong relationships with the OEM infrastructures, right? So, like for example, we work with Dell, we work with Lenovo, we work with Supermicro, and though of course they're hardware agnostic, but we have a good amount of resources to get people access to GPU infrastructure worldwide. Right? We're very well tied with the supply chain. And today, for those in the GPU land, getting access to a GPU server is not easy at all, right? I mean, if you need a B300, probably wait time right now is between 8 and 12 weeks, and some people say in certain parts of the world it's probably going to take 20 to 24 weeks, which means half a year wait. It's not, but we can definitely help expedite procurement of GPU infrastructure. And last but not the least, like I said, these are extremely expensive devices. So, obviously as a service provider, people look for financing options for it and so on. And at Hosted.ai, we also offer that. Yeah. We have partnerships with several leading, let's call it as both financial institutions and let's call it as, financial services companies that can help you finance GPUs in very attractive terms. Where in fact, one of the partnerships that we have let people have own GPUs without actually even putting the GPU capex on their books. So again, a little bit more. I don't want to talk. I know this is an industry talk. I'll just but just in the spirit of what I shared, with a platform like Hosted.ai, you can actually turn it into a turnkey GPU as a service platform, right? And you can get maximum utilization, close to 100% utilization of GPU infrastructure. You can actually overcommit the GPU, and the advantage of overcommitting the GPU is obviously make more money, right? So the same card which is earlier making say $2, and if you overcommit twice, it makes you $4. Overcommit 2 times, it makes you $6, right? So we all know this from cloud, and I don't want to preach to the choir, but that's how it goes. Then we have a control plane, we have a full suite of tools, we have a full, software-defined GPU, we have secure GPU sharing. This is what our platform does. And bottom line, you can sell more GPU with less capex, and you can make more margin per card, 5x more margin per card. So then, the two other things that we do at Hosted.ai, like I said, we have GPUasAservice.com, where it's a matchmaking. Think of it as a marketplace, right? The providers and enterprises who want services from these providers, and they match needs. Right? So we match enterprises wanting GPUs to service providers offering GPUs, and you contract directly, right? So we don't take it out there. Then we just launched this last week. There's a domain called Packet.ai that we own. This is a developer GPU cloud. Because what we said is, we are offering now, we've actually built technology that lets you overcome it over provisioning GPU. How do we actually, let developers use it, right? So that's where we built this developer cloud. It's streamlined, it's low cost experience. It's low cost, and get resources on demand if you want to also get reserve clusters. And if you're a service provider, you can list your GPUs, you can list your offerings on Packet.ai, and we'll do the demand generation. Okay. So Packet.ai and hosting GPUasAservice are two things that we've really launched in a big way in the last few weeks. And it's typically at a much lower cost, right? Because the infrastructure runs on Hosted.ai, it's all committed, it's all provisioned. So we are essentially kind of bringing, let me call it as cloud stack semantics into the world of GPUs. And I'll leave you with just a couple of more data points. The results are very simple. The service provider is getting 5x more GPU revenue and margin, right? So you see on the left side, right, it's service providers usually losing money when they run GPUs. Neoclouds lose money. But with Hosted.ai, you can overcommit the GPU, suddenly it becomes a much more profitable business. And yeah, it's, with GPU AS, we make it much more accessible. You can really get your GPUs on demand, and you can tune your GPUs so as to meet the workloads. And it's of course needless to say, there's also the environment and sustainability benefits, right, where AI needs less hardware power. And a little bit about us, like I said, these are my four founders. There's Hitler, James, Julian. I've worked with them for like over 12, 15 years, and we founded the company in 2024, and we launched in last year, and our first customers are on board in 2025. And our core tech, like I said, we're able to do GPU virtualization with us because we acquired technology that was doing it for a little bit of time. So it took us, so we have a pretty strong technological moat in the company. And then the founders together, we have a pretty experienced team. Let me stop here. Thank you so much for the time. I'll leave, I know it's in half an hour, I'll leave some time for questions.
Thank you, Naren.